Good evening and welcome back to Marty's Tying Bench. Tonight I'm once again putting together kits for this week's Fly Squad, and we're going to venture into dry flies. This is a Pearly Griffiths Gnat. You can find a really good Davey McPhail video of this pattern, and I haven't particularly made changes, but you guys are used to my voice. The hook is a Riki 070, size 16. I chose it because it's a little heavier wire than some of the dry fly hooks, and when I've got this much hackle to help float a fly, why not take advantage of it and fish a stronger, heavier hook. The thread is uni A-dot, and I like to start it in the middle of the hook, and I'm going to tie in 3 strands of Krystal flash. Now, we're going to tie it in as if it were a tail, but we're not really imitating a bug with a tail. This is a cluster midge. In the West, we use it as mating midges or cluster midges. If you listen to Davey's video, you'd get the impression they're terrestrials, the kind of flies that live on farms and hatch out of the dung. So I'm going to tie that in and shorten up the tips so that they're behind the eye of the hook. Make a couple more turns towards the back. My next material is a whiting Grizzly saddle hackle, and you want to choose one that's a little bit longer than the gap of the hook. Now, a little trick when you're tying these things, you tie these things in everything from size 14 down to 22. So when you get these feathers, if you got one that's too big, grab a bigger hook and tie a bigger one. You'll want a variety anyway. Now, I'm not going to trim the stem on this one. I'm going to set it out there so that it's, well, let's get closer to it, the same length as the other stubs. And then move my thread back until it's hanging over the barb of the hook, which is coincidentally about where you start running out of straight hook shank. Now when I lift this up, since I didn't trim, I'm going to have fiber sticking out the back, and on this pattern that's desirable, that's okay. Our last material is Peacock. Get a couple of strands, and I find that a medium plush Peacock works better. If it's too plush, you can kind of overwhelm these small flies. There, I'm tying that in so it's the same length as everything else. And wrap forward to the eye. Now when you pick up your Peacock, make sure you don't get a strand of Krystal flash woven in there. And if you can hold these herls side by side as you come forward, you can make it nice and plush. There we go. Now I didn't count, but I know there's probably 10 to 12 turns of Peacock there, so keep that in mind. When I come forward with the Grizzly, it doesn't matter too much, but if you can get it to curve towards the rear, there I got 5 turns, and it's going to be a lot easier to tie off. I don't need much space for the head because the fibers are curved, if at all, towards the back. There, I'm going to get that out of the way, and I'm going to tie my whip finish before I even trim it. Now, I held the hackle to the top when I tied it off for a reason. That's because when you need to trim something close, especially hackle, it's a heck of a lot easier to trim on the upper side than if you get fibers sticking out into the eye from the bottom. Okay, now we're going to trim the Krystal flash so it's about the same length as the body. Now we could have trimmed this before. I like to leave it on there because when I cut it off last, I can hold the cut tips neat and set them somewhere I'm going to find it, because it's the first material I'm going to use on the next fly. Well, there you have it, Pearly Griffiths Gnat.